The entire NTP report on there, like it was brought up, Derek Bros has done phenomenal work. He was one of 2 journalists, period, in the courtroom for the fluoride trial. And he came up from Mexico to cover it. That's how uncovered the entire trial was.
Stayed in San Francisco for weeks.
Landmark decision about to be made. And here's the thing that Jay told us on Wednesday. The NTP report that came out, that checked off all of the boxes that Fluoride Action Network was arguing during the court case, to the point to where the judge contacted them and said, hey, in light of the fact that this report has been released, is there anything that needs to be added or subtracted? And Fluoride Action Network was able to say, well, no, that every point that we made in court and on record is, confirmed in this report. So the entire community of dentists that have decided they're going to stay silent on this look like absolute chumps. And yeah, I really do. I may be sounding hopeful right now, but it's the only bit of good news we've had in a few weeks. So I really do think that this has the potential to unwind the fluoride program in the U.S. And it's in everything. Everything. It's in your freaking potato chips.
Oh. It might have already affected the Canadian one. Because it might have already affected some Canadian ones. I don't know if Thiessen, you talked about that, but Calgary's in the midst of putting it back in the water. So there was a big controversy over getting it, keeping it out. But I think we went through some sort of vote or some sort of propaganda campaign, and it made it basically back on the table to go back in the water. And now it was just up to council or something like that. Tease, I don't know if you're more familiar with that, but this is great timing for some cities in Canada where there was actually a push to put it back in.
What prompted the push to put it back?
I think it's corporate. Honestly, I think there's some corporate influence. There's these groups of dentists and these other people that they think that, they need it for their kids' teeth. And it's the same old sort of story, but they're organized and funded by these weird groups, fluoride action groups.
So
it's kind of creepy.
Yeah.
I don't know the particulars of what you're citing, Graham, but insofar as just the social policy, a hyperbolic, won't you think of the children mentality works both beauties in the sense of roping people into this sort of thing, but also it gives fifth column infiltration a really, really easy act that they can play along with, which is another way of saying that this is a coordinated spiritual sabotage, always has been, always will be. And everyone else who latches onto a bureaucratic entity that justifies their conduct is basically playing make-believe and seamlessly interweaving themselves with the people screaming, won't you think of the children? So we can't really just look at it as if it's all one thing. Can you hear the buzzsaw? Is it happening? Is it? No? Okay. Yeah. All right. Anyway, so that's kind of what it is. It's the deeper underlay of a spiritual warfare campaign utilizing the superficial bureaucracies that we point our fingers at, but it isn't that simple. And it's not going to go away as long as we continue to default what we permit to exist in our midst to government authoritative entities as they unanimously try and murder us. That's just the reality, and that's not going to change.
But the thing, Tease, is that, living through the Rona regime and trying to stand up on my own, that it really takes a collective to make change. So all you can do is acknowledge that there is spiritual warfare. I mean, if you distill it, people just hoard out their souls. And I personally do believe in reincarnation. I have since I was 13. I just never talk about it openly, but recently had a Kundalini awakening, which is a real thing. So that's what it boils down to. Do you want to keep on coming and doing, like when I had my near-death experience, I heard you have an opportunity to break your patterns. So these are generational traumas. And plus the poisons, it's all to not self-realize. It's all to not go within and distract in a digital hamster wheel. It's like been in motion.
So I guess I'll say this. Our pain is the chain that keeps us from change. Think of whatever that means to you. And then you're going to return to it time and time again because life is going to make you. It's kind of just the situation we're all in. So Given that, we can either learn from the pain and be as creative as we can be working together in alternative and counter-economic ways, or we can keep being bludgeoned because there's that Sanskrit kind of notion that lessons will be repeated until they're learned. But even then, once you learn it, it doesn't matter if you dwell on it because you're supposed to do something with it. We are the change, and so is everyone listening to this. It's as simple as that. You're not going to get rid of the pain. Learn from it instead.
Well said. Well said. Yeah, you know, it's maybe I've shared this before, like when they were going after the low-hanging fruit, the elderly people who hold the wisdom, I think that's also part of the design. And I said to myself, like, who's going to be the wisdom keepers? And I just heard my higher self, you are. And I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, I have to carry the wisdom. And we don't talk about wisdom, which is, you know, knowledge from the soul. And that's what I'm going to be into from, you know, the rest of my whatever life after, now that I've finished my George Floyd book. I'm like, I remembered that my first passion was trying to figure out what is the soul, what's been the research, you know, and then I've recently found out, or it gelled, that it's like early Jews and Christians who psyop the stars. Like, we originally come from the stars, and they've just diluted it and created religion. Like in 1657, there was like a Madonna in a St. Patrick's church and started bleeding tears. Well, I looked at like what's the, you know, the actual what happens. So it starts condensation, or like the materials start bleeding. So they figured this was a great way to control the people. And then the early Jews and Christians, you know, like this psyop, this like crying Madonna, I found it in 2018 and I found it in 1657. So it just shows like the playbook. But again, it goes down to each and every one of us, especially if there is no individuation. There's no self-realization. It's like, oh, I have purple hair, I'm an individual. No, you're like, no, not at all.
Speaking of individuals, Mike and I were trying to figure out exactly how many individuals there were, weren't we? And we were running up against some barriers that seemed...
Yeah, everyone relies on everyone for like population, trying to calculate individuals. Like most people, or most authoritative sources rely on government statistics, like the census, reports from like local counties. And so Charlie and I were trying to come up with like unique and novel ways to calculate a population, but it's incredibly difficult because everyone relies on a centralized point of data to know how many people are in a particular area. It's very difficult to calculate. I'm still working on it, Charlie, and I believe we can if we find encyclopedias, then we might be able to project a likely population number. But even then, it's iffy.
Was that to somewhat debunk the population increase? That's happened
along the lines.
I thought it was a decrease.
Miriam was saying is that like you just have to start asking questions about all kinds of things. And this population figure that's been established, like, well, who established it? The United Nations? Oh shit! Well, I don't trust them for anything. All right, so why is that all of a sudden like I'm supposed to believe them when it comes down to population? And like, well, all right, well. Is it as high as they say it is, or is it lower? Is it higher?
And did it increase? Like, yeah, I mean, they could use the increase, as a ways to shut things down.
Energy on it, one way or the other. I'm just interested to know what the number is.
It's what they use to push the climate change, though.
Exactly.
Yeah. Is those numbers,
and then weaponized.
Yeah, if they're telling us the population is 8 billion, but if the number really is, let's say, 4 billion. Then we're all good. Then what do they push?
Right.
We got it. And I mean, they try to tell us the population's out of control. At the same time, the figures are showing us infant mortality's on the rise. Male fertility's on the decline. So I mean, how can this work?
To say nothing of the fact that you could take 8 billion people, stand them shoulder to shoulder in the state of Texas. In the real estate that exists there, you would still have room left over. but we're
Isn't
overpopulated.
one of the states you can give everybody like
we're
an
mismanaged.
We're 1,200 square feet in Texas.
Yeah, you could give everyone. You could get everyone almost 2 acres in Alaska. On the entire world population. That all 8 billion people.
We're relying on numbers from like China. Like who the hell's doing the census in China?
Well, plus they inflate their numbers to get more money from the government because it's so centralized. So like the little local guys will say, "Oh, we have twice as many people."
There's a lot
and
of
then that's done here. So,
but I think Miriam's onto the big problem with the spiritual warfare though is that we have to look at this like we dying is not really, it's not the end, right? We do move on to other dimensions, other lifetimes, whatever, and that's a major problem right now in society. I mean, we're still living in this weird, even though most people know that we're not just this material. Too bad Alex from Skeptical is not here because he could sort of articulate this better. But
it was on this show. Sorry, Graham.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
It was on this show that I brought up. I think Sam was on where I'm like, let's look at the light at the end of the tunnel. And it was Trump was speaking, and I was watching the COVID task force. And that week, a lot of politicians, the way he said it, the light at the end of the tunnel. And so I'm like, I'm going to go look to see. And that indeed is part of the soul trap where you get siphoned. And I did recently Bufo and ayahuasca because I've been waiting to finish this book so I can have my own great reset and get the grime off of me. And I remembered. And I was at this ayahuasca ceremony. I'll just share this real quick. And the Native American said, he was speaking, he goes, and we're plagued by COVID and AIDS. And I was like, peace out. Like that's a man-made warfare. So why? And then there was a row of people. I saw myself, I didn't stay with the crowd. I was just in front of the fire. And I've done ayahuasca before, the last time being in Corona, California in 2019. And so there was a row, they were all lined up and they said we're going to share special lotion. And I have supernasal powers since my near-death experience. Like the porta potties were behind. I had to move. It's like I just was smelling crap. So as he's busting out the lotion, I'm like, dudes, this is like Johnson & Johnson baby shampoo. Like I could smell it. And the medicine just said, you are an ancient soul. Do not listen to others. And I trust myself. And that's, for me, that's my lesson, that I am wise. And in this next part of my life, whatever, I'm going to inspire people to live from their higher self. That's what I want to do.
We're in this weird time where we're the only society or the only culture probably forever that doesn't believe in this stuff, right? Since the Enlightenment or the darkening or whatever you want to call it. I mean, I know there's still a battle going on, and I think in the 1800s we were winning this, like, theosophy, spiritualism. There was a big pushback against the dogma of the church and scientism, and in the early 1900s we lost that war, but I think we're gaining it back. I mean, the new atheists have kind of lost their little battle. I think people realize there's something more to this than this materialistic existence.
Someone, it was Dr. Narco at Old World, Florida. I did a little video on the soul trap, and he said, that's something that was circulated during Gnosticism, and that, hell and earth, or hell and heaven are on earth. But nonetheless, I know that I've been here before. I don't know if any of you have asked that question. So I think there is a wheel. And I did. Sorry.
No, I'm not trying to cut you off. Please finish, and then I'll add to the sentiment.
Just I've done past life regression. Of course, you have to take it all with a grain of salt. But if you're living from your higher self and you're trying to think of a higher timeline in this day and age, who's to say what's real? Is this version of shit that they're giving us real? So why not look within and project the best? I mean, it's also has to do with the stars. They say, I know that I have a tendency to look at the best in someone. It's called the Uranus complex. Go ahead, Tease.
I kind of forgot my own thought for a second, but I guess we'll kind of pick up on the idea.
I know a lot of people with the Uranus complex.
You get the same problem.
It's better than Uranus.
But it's basically when it comes down to reincarnation. Edgar Cayce put out or it wasn't he that he put out the book, but it's called Reincarnation Unnecessary. The notion of the light being a trap. I don't think that that's something that paints really a favorable picture of the dying process. If you get more into that, that would be the preparation for death, which would be the Egyptian and Tibetan books of the dead. And that's not even the original title of those, because the Egyptians conventionally didn't even have a word for death. It's a continuum. It's a spiraled process. And when it comes to the notion of heaven and hell, yeah, they are on earth, because there's no separation between any of it. It's beings within beings. It's the easiest way to think of it, in the same way in which you can think of your inner biome as something that is viscerally intertwined with every aspect of your holistic health. So too are you a cell within the larger earth, which is itself within the planetary spheres that have a significant influence on us here. And that's a spiritual hierarchical dynamic that we're inseparably intertwined with. And that also extends into the lower astral eighth sphere hell dynamic in the kind of like demonic side of things. And so that's the Vesica Pisces. It's the two spheres overlapping with one another, and they're going to be pulling at you every single moment that you're here. So choose wisely and understand that you have a lot more power than you realize, and so much of the darkness is just trying to convince you otherwise.
The Bardo Total, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, that hell you're talking about. And this is why the personal work is so good, because they say that all those demons and all those things you encounter are part, even they don't think it's an external thing. It's all part of your subconscious. It's all part of these like archetypes that are within yourself that you're going to have to deal with.
And the subconscious might be memories from another life.
Yeah, exactly. Or trauma, whatever kind of things you had to go through before, but they try to teach you that you don't need to reincarnate. I mean, and so yeah, reincarnation might be real, but who knows if we want to come back here or not? Like you said, let's just move on to the next realm.
I am liberating. I am saying, take me to the lake of remembrance. I mean, obviously, I have a lot more work to do before the Book of the Dead. So I went and I was like, I have to find the old books. I have to go somewhere where there's access to estate sales. Because it's the early Christians and Jews did take everything from the Son of God, ancestors, and diluted it. So like, where am I going to find the truth? You have to go within. I remember being in Luxor in the temple of Dendera, because I was doing hosting a show on the Ark of the Covenant. I remember looking up, and when I saw the astrology, I was like, yeah, this is, they teach you as a Christian, it's evil. Like I've had Christians go, don't look at the stars too much. And it's not a sun horoscope. It's really a science of looking at your moon, your rising, the aspects, the houses. It's like a roadmap. And I am just very jazzed that I'm back into, that's why I'm wearing the moon and the sun. I'm like, that's where I come from. And that's what I want to learn about. Like they even fucked with the zodiac signs. Like the real new year is Virgo. It is the Lion's Gate. It is where Giza, where the Sphinx is. And so if you can go within, I mean, I think someone would know if they're an old soul or not. Or even if you're not an old soul, like to go on a self-discovery inside and follow your soul. It's like everything in this inverted matrix is to prevent you from doing that.
Miriam, do you feel like frequent bouts of deja vu are an inclination that one is an old soul, or what do you use to as a metric for that?
That's an interesting question. After interviewing Max, so when I was looking at the jab, I don't know if any of you guys, Jeff Berwick did a little clip because I was interviewing Max and I said one of the 9,000 side effects is deja vu. They literally put that. Like how bizarro is that? So when I was younger, I had deja vus. And then Max said, if you don't have deja vus anymore, his belief is that you've decided a new path.
Oh, that's fascinating.
And so I don't have them anymore. But I do get downloads. Like, so I was hearing the phrase like 2 months ago in a specific context, but would you die for him? So I went back, that's from Seventh Sign with Demi Moore. And they talk about the Guff